The original Rocky came out in 1976, and spoiler warning for those who still haven't seen it, but at the end of the film, Rocky loses. A lot of people forget that's the case, and for good reason. By the end of the film, after Rocky and Apollo Creed have battered each other beyond recognition, after Rocky has undergone such brutal training, once he got the girl he always wanted and went from a low-life thug to a disciplined guy working hard for his dream. Well, after all that, before the scorecards were ever announced, we already knew that Rocky had won. Since hitting the silver screen 47 years ago, the character Rocky Balboa has remained a household name. And while the sequels evolved mostly into popcorn cinema, the original film remains a classic drama that stands the test of time. To fully understand the significance of the film, you have to understand the landscape of Hollywood in the 1970s. And to keep it short and sweet, it was a dark era in film. And not dark in a bad way. So many classic films came from this decade, but most of them carried a seriously dark tone, especially compared to the pop cinema of today. The Godfather, Taxi Driver, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Badlands, Apocalypse Now, The Deer Hunter, Death Wish, Dog Day Afternoon, and A Clockwork Orange. I could go on, but for the sake of time, let's just say that so many popular movies had dark characters, dark plots, and dark endings. And it makes sense as you understand the pop culture of the 1970s would be affected by the previous decade. These days we like to think of the 60s as the happy, hippie time in history, but in reality, the 1960s give today's polarized world a run for its money. It was the decade JFK was assassinated. So was his brother Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., and Malcolm X. They had the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, an emerging drug culture, the first serious divide between generations, the threat of nuclear war, and a rapid rise in inflation. And all of this had its effect on the public consciousness, and in my opinion led to filmmakers making darker films in the years to come, and audiences identifying with them. And in the midst of all of this, a young, struggling actor named Sylvester Stallone decided to write a script that would counter those dark times.
Well, I felt at the time that cinema, at least the movies I had been seeing, were at an all-time low. Everything was anti-society, anti-Christ, anti-government, anti-everything, and there was no one to root for. Gee, I missed the good old films, yet Hollywood hasn't taken heed and hasn't made any good old-fashioned type films where morality was at the forefront. So I took the opportunity to write this particular film, of course, being somewhat selfish because I had myself in mind for it, but that was the main motivation.
Prior to any of this, Stallone had been extremely desperate for money and actually had to take his first acting gig in a softcore adult movie. He described himself being literally homeless when he decided to take the role for just a couple $100. He's quoted saying, "It was either do that movie or rob someone, because I was at the end of my rope." Stallone then moved to New York City and took odd jobs around town until eventually landing a gig as an usher at a movie theater, where he would use his unlimited access to films to learn to write scripts.
I got a job as an usher, and people said, why? Well, it's $39 a week. Who could turn that down? But more importantly, I could watch films all day long. And I started to dissect them, and I would take a little inexpensive tape recorder, record the soundtrack and the dialogue, and go home and try to replace the dialogue. No, it's like a game. And after a while, I started picking up a little tempo and a little rhythm.
Stallone continued to pursue acting and managed to land some very small roles that were quickly leading him nowhere. But his dream wouldn't die so easy. And once he had his script for Rocky complete, he was adamant on getting it in front of the right people. And he did. But there was one major problem. Apart from buying his script, producers wanted nothing else to do with him. And this led to one of the most epic standoffs in the history of Hollywood.
After all, when you first went along with your script, I mean, they liked the script, but they were so desperate not to have you that they kept offering you increasingly large sums of money to go away, didn't they?
Right, it went up to about $265,000.
Not to appear in the film.
Right, to stay away, to get off my lawn, boy. My wife, I said, if you don't mind taking a long shot, like just ended up in the backyard grazing or something, and because we don't have any money left, I'll go ahead and see if we can tangle with the power structure a little bit.
And you did.
Well, yeah, you have nothing to lose when you have nothing to lose.
Now,
Stallone showed massive courage and self-belief to hold out during that time. And it's that kind of courage and self-belief that was found in the script he wrote and the character he embodied. The film was given a small budget, just under $1 million, and sent into production. Pretty soon it was evident that Stallone was the perfect fit for the role. He was Rocky Balboa. But who was that? Rocky was a nobody who fought for scraps and made collections for a loan shark. Apollo Creed was the world champion, but when his next opponent wound up getting injured, he was forced to look for a replacement. He saw a name in the local rosters, the Italian Stallion, and he liked it so much that he decided this nobody would be his next matchup. Little did he know that Rocky might have let his life slip into the gutter, but he was once a guy with a lot of potential, and this opportunity lit a fire under him that had long been out. Rocky made good with his old coach, got the girl he always wanted, and began training like a madman. Not with the goal of winning the fight, but rather surviving it until the final bell.
Nobody's ever gone the distance with Creed. And if I can go that distance, seeing that bell rings and I'm still standing, I want to know for the first time in my life, see, that I weren't just another bum from the neighborhood.
Despite the odds stacked against him, he managed to do exactly what he wanted, and he went the distance with Creed and put up one hell of a fight that no one saw coming. When the film released, it was a smash hit and reminded audiences just how good it felt to see a positive story once again.
Rocky would actually be considered like a middle ending now, because actually Rocky didn't win the fight in the end of the first one, all right? But he did what he wanted to do. He won it for himself, People walked out, it had been a long time since they'd gone to a movie and walked out feeling great, all right? And people remembered how good it was. And then Stallone even was saying, I want to do movies that have happy endings. America wants that. Well, America actually found out they did want that.
Rocky became the highest grossing film of 1976, turning its meager budget into $225 million at the box office, and won Academy Awards for Best Editing, Best Director, and Best Picture. Going on to see 4 sequels leading into the 90s, somewhat of a reboot in 2006, and led to the Creed franchise, which is still going strong with the 3rd film right around the corner. The film has also been selected for preservation in the National Film Registry. But that first movie about a tough guy nobody who was given a chance and ran with it, well, that's the film that started it all. And I always see these interesting parallels in works of art that go on to become huge brands and household names. I saw the same thing in The Matrix from 1999. When a film is made with a certain truth embedded into it by the artist, it can hold a power to transcend its medium. After all, stories are all we have in this life, and each of our lives is a story. And Stallone used his life and his dreams to tell us a story about overcoming not just the things around you or all of your lofty goals, but rather yourself. Because the truth in life is, the most important thing to overcome is yourself. But it's no easy task. It takes courage, will, determination, commitment, discipline. And no matter how far things have slipped away or gone in a different direction, you can always get them back and achieve what other people think is impossible. At least that's what I thought when I watched Rocky, and especially when I heard the story behind it. And that's why even at the end of the movie, when the judges' scorecards are read, and we learn that Rocky has lost the fight, nobody cares. It was never about winning a fight. It was about living like a winner.